Welcome to Beauty and the Mess, redefining what it means to have it all and how to find fulfillment in life. And now your host, transformational life coach, and creator of the activewear line Beauty and the Mess, Robin Emmerich.
Welcome to Beauty and the Mess podcast. Today we've got Dr. Norm Shealy, a neurosurgeon who started the holistic medicine movement. Dr. Shealy, thank you so much for being here. I am so incredibly honored to have you.
My great pleasure.
Such a long journey from when I first met you, and and you are still doing incredible things in this world. So for those that don't know you, I would love for you to start with your journey of really how you became the leader in holistic medicine and how you got here.
You know, at age 4, I suddenly knew and announced to my family I was going to become a physician. They didn't know why. I didn't even know what a physician was. At age 16, as I'm getting ready to graduate from high school 2 years earlier than everybody else in my class, I decided I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. So I get through all the preambles and I get into neurosurgical residency. And during my first rotation on neurosurgery as a resident, I was assisting on a procedure called cordotomy back in the late 1950s into the 60s. That was the treatment of choice for chronic pain. You go into the operating room, you take the spine, the bone off the back of the spine at 2 levels, and then you take a piece of an old single-edge razor blade, at least it's been sterilized, and break it off in a little piece of pliers, stick it in, and cut the front half of the spinal cord. 80% of the time, it will get rid of pain on the opposite side of the body. 10% of the time, it will paralyze that leg. 10% of the time, it will paralyze your bladder and bowel. 100% of the time, you'll never have another orgasm. And worse than everything, 10% of the time, you have post-cordotomy dysesthesia, which is new pain worse than anything you've had before. And after 8 years, it wears off. So when I finished my neurosurgical residency, I spent 3 years doing research on pain physiology. I was on the faculty at Western Reserve Medical School. And so in all my spare time, I worked on pain physiology. And that's when I came up with my first 2 inventions, transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, or TENS, still widely used around the world, and spinal cord stimulation, still widely used around the world. Interestingly, when I presented my work to the American Association of Neurological Surgeons on the pain research in animals, they jumped up on the stage and grabbed the microphone and said, "You're an idiot," and all what you're talking about. They said, "It's in animals." When I presented my work in 6 patients, every neurosurgeon in the room wanted to do the procedure. I often say surgeons rush in where angels fear to tread. Well, all of a sudden, I was being sent 400 patients a year from all over the world with a spinal cord stimulator. And I turned down 94% of them. They had been too damaged. They had had 5 to 7 unsuccessful back operations. They were on Percodan, a horrible narcotic, and on Valium, one of the worst tranquilizers ever invented. And so after a couple of years of not knowing what to do with these people, I decided to really change and said, I'm going to find out how to treat people who fail everything. So in 1971, I started what became the first holistic medical clinic in the world. And I started off with behavioral modification. We put patients in the hospital for a full month, weaned them off their drugs, and just did, a TENS unit and all kinds of physical modalities, put them in exercise in the swimming pool. And by the end of my first year, I had treated 400 patients with a remarkable, all of these are long-term failures, with a remarkable 80% success rate. Well, over the next few years, I began to learn about biofeedback. It hadn't really come on the market yet, and autogenic training, self-regulation technique. And by 1974, I was so impressed with that I went back to get a PhD in psychology because I wanted to understand the brain more than ever. And then over the next few years, I began to think about the word holistic. Jan Smuts was the Prime Minister of South Africa back in the 20s. He was 28 when he wrote his book on holism. And it was the best integration of all aspects of science into the concept of holism. Everything affects everything, or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. In 1978 or 9, I started the American Holistic Medical Association. Mm-hmm. And basically, the one thing that's missing from conventional medicine is the most important of all. It's spirituality. It was kicked out 300 years ago. And it isn't really in psychology in general either. I mean, Carl Jung did a bit of it, but Freud was the least spiritual person in history, I think. Called Freud the fraud. And I think he created more damage to the field of psychiatry and psychology than it helped. At any rate, so over these years, I have continued to focus on what can we do to help people that doesn't make them worse. That's at the top of our list. It has to be safe first. Now I have worked with 33,000 people, and essentially 100% of them have failed conventional medicine. And of course, now not all of my patients come in because of pain. In fact, hypertension, depression, anxiety, chronic disease of every imaginable kind, of people who fail conventional medicine is what comes to the clinic. In 1972, I also experienced my own first past life recall. And that was the beginning of my work with past life therapy. Since that time, I've done hundreds of those with individuals, and I have another out-of-the-box belief. All chronic, significant illness, not a minor thing, but big illnesses, that, especially those that don't respond well, are due to unfinished business from a previous life. At the time of death, you were angry, guilty, anxious, depressed, etc., and you've never gotten over it, and it comes back in a future life. Interestingly, in my entire career, I've had one Catholic priest as a patient. He came to me to discuss past life therapy. And I reminded him that until 325, reincarnation was part of Christianity. Constantine did not wish people to think they had a second chance. So at the council in 325, he mandated they remove any concept from Christianity. Of course, he was such an SOB, worse than Saddam Hussein and 10 others like him. He didn't get converted until his deathbed. So he could continue raping, murdering, etc. But he thought he'd be forgiven on his deathbed if he converted at the last moment. Well, I'm not impressed with Constantine either. And it isn't, I don't believe in it. I know it. I mean, I've worked I know 30 of my own past lives. And I could say 3 of them, well, I wasn't quite as bad as Constantine or Saddam Hussein, but I'm not proud of 3 of my past lives. The other 27 is that I know about, I have been a pretty good guy. And so that has influenced me over these last almost 40 years now, because I sense it in everything that I do. I mean, for instance, looking way back, even before I knew what reincarnation was about, in 1958, when I moved to Boston for my neurosurgical residency, I knew one person. We'd interned together, and so I wrote and said, look, let's share an apartment, because I didn't know anybody else. He said, fine, he had a 2-bedroom apartment. And I moved in, and he was dating what became my wife. And I was jealous. And finally, I knew he was Jewish, and he'd never marry a Schuster. So I finally said, David, you will never marry Shardy, and I might. Would you please stop dating her? A month later, he gave me permission with the caveat that I couldn't date her for 1 month after he stopped. And nobody thinks to tell Shardy what's going on, but I called her every night for a month. And on my birthday, December 4th, 1958, we had our first date, and we were engaged on January 10th. And I knew, at some level, I knew her at a soul level. And it was, one of the best decisions of this life, of course. But many of my experiences since then have been encountering people from a past life, mostly in a good way. However, in 1995, I was paralyzed by a physician who came down to show me his hot hands. His license had been suspended for healing with his hands. He said, show me your hot hands. Put his hands on my neck, jerked my head at 180 degrees, and paralyzed me. Now, at the time, I thought I must have cut off his head in a previous life. I didn't. I actually had him shot 300 years ago. He was trying to take over my kingdom, and I disposed of him. So, fortunately, of course, I had major neurosurgery, and I'm walking because of neurosurgery on my own neck.
Wow.
But all my other lives have been, pretty darn good. I know many details about them. And interestingly, for instance, I tried for years to find a physician that could take over my practice. I wanted another holistic and sane physician. I turned down 100 physicians. They were wimps.
Wow.
And in 2015, I was invited by a longstanding physician friend of mine to come up to Kansas City to a workshop he was doing on sound and music in medicine. I walked in, and giving it with him was Sergei Sorin. When I walked into the room, I recognized Sergei as being a companion from St. Francis Day. I go up to this person I've never met before and give him a hug. His wife is sitting there, and she turns to her friend and she says, I think I've just lost my husband. And 1 year later, he's the only one of my past life that I know as another physician. He came down and joined me at my clinic, and his wife and I, and all three of us are good friends now.
No. Oh, how wonderful.
I had a spontaneous image of walking with St. Francis over 30 years ago. In 2005, I was giving a lecture in Canada at a medical meeting, and the reincarnated St. Francis recognized me and came down, and we got introduced again. We've become pen pals now. And he's a neurosurgeon who teaches meditation and mysticism.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
He has agreed not only that, I was one of his closest companions, but Sergei was also, and I've met the other two, there are four of us who were his closest companions. So we're now all friends again, 800 years later. Okay, meanwhile, back at the ranch, so to speak, I have continued working with this whole concept. And it was, I didn't mention what happened also in 1972. I met a man named Henry Rucker. I first heard about Edgar Casey, of course.
Yes.
And I said, I want to meet a psychic who can do that. So I was referred to Henry Rucker in Chicago. On December 19th, I flew to Chicago for an hour consultation with Henry. I walked in, he said, I've been waiting 10 years for you. My teacher told me you would come. And Henry knew more about me than I did. Henry was a wonderful Black man from the ghetto of Chicago who was the best one-on-one counselor I've ever met in my life. And we called it psychic diagnosis in those days. but he could walk by. He was 75% accurate and just walk by and, oh, he's got so-and-so. He knew exactly what was going on. Well, then, of course, in 1984, I met Carolyn Mace, and we began working together. And in 1988, when we wrote a book called The Creation of Health, I said, we can't call it psychic. Well, people will be turned off by that. That's when I created the term medical intuitive. So to me, a person who really can be accurate is a medical intuitive. They may or may not have other spiritual skills. Some of them are also spiritual healers. Ogawa was pretty good as a medical intuitive, one of the great healers in history. But her skill was spiritual healing. I have 15,000 letters that were sent to her by patients who wrote about their benefits of 3 minutes at the most with this woman touching them. And so to me, this is the broad field of our, well, thinking sets in motion spiritual forces to bring about change in body, mind, emotions, companions, hopes, despair. Every thought is a prayer. And we have to be very careful how we focus our prayers and our thinking. And that's especially important today in the current manic pandemic nonsense that's going on. I'm not saying there's not a problem. I believe it is entirely politically motivated. And I don't know whether it's the leftists, the rightists, or both fighting against one another, but they're not doing the best for us. However, that takes me to my most important philosophy. I can't change it. It's not possible. I can't change. It looks as you've got sun there as well as here. But if it was cloudy, I can't change that. And I can't change what the government's doing. Therefore, I detach. And of course, all of that is a result of my practicing autogenic training twice a day for 3 months back in 1972. And now, well, I don't waste my time fretting over things I can't change. I'd rather detach. Okay, who cares? And yet, I've continued to work and feel great. At 87 years of age, I still put in a full week's work, and I still, have new ideas, new creations. And fortunately, I now have Sergei Sorin as a partner medically, and he's roughly half my age. So.
Now, how long has he been with you?
Oh, since 2016.
2016. Okay.
4 years, 4 full years next month.
Okay. That's amazing.
Oh yeah, and we, obviously we're different people. I don't mean to say he's not a clone of me, but he's got intellectual strength and interest and broad base, and so it is a wonderful, return of two people who've known one another in the past.
I love that.
It's true. I mean, the same was true of my wife. I know about at least 3 of our previous lives together. And families often, for instance, I have a grandson that my wife and I both knew when he was 18 months old is the reincarnation of her father. And I
believe it.
He's just turned 22. I've never told him this. But someday I will tell him.
Now, do you believe that a person has to believe in reincarnation in order to receive the benefits of past life regression?
They have to be open to the possibility. I don't think they have to be a firm believer. But if they're, oh my God, if they're what I call a flaming fundamentalist,
that would be a block, right?
Yeah. If they're a flaming fundamentalist, you're wasting your time.
Mm-hmm.
They have to, accept, well, maybe. And that's good enough for me, as long as they're
curiosity, in a sense, openness.
Exactly.
Yeah. I agree.
About 1 person in 100, even when they're open, can't do it. I mean,
why is that?
It's some kind of mental block, I suppose. I mean, I'll spend a whole hour sometime with them and finally say, well, you're not ready. But
Yeah.
it's only 1 in 100.
Yeah.
And it is still my favorite psychological tool. But meanwhile, I also consider myself an electrical junkie.
Yes, yes. So tell me about the pulse electromagnetic frequency.
Well, 8 years ago, I began doing research on this thing called pulsed electromagnetic frequency to treat diabetic neuropathy pain. People who have what's called diabetic neuropathy lose the sensation in their feet primarily, but it begins to be painful. They have numb feet, but painful feet. And so I began working on one of the commercially available PIMF devices back then. And then one day, about 3.5 years ago, I thought, 30 years ago, I get these downloads that just come like that. I had a download that the chakras would respond to Earth frequency. So the first chakra would be the same as the Earth itself, 7.83. Each additional chakra would be another 7.83. So the seventh chakra will be 7 times 7.83. But my guide said, well, Norman, that is true, but we're not clones. So we vary plus or minus 2. So it's 5.83 to 9.83 for the first chakra. And then, so it goes from 5.83 at the lowest possible frequency to 56.81 at the top. And I found an engineer who was able to make me a PIMP device that puts out these frequencies.
Wow.
And it is so much better than every other conventional one we tried. We, about, well, at least 2.5 years ago now, I suddenly thought, I bet this puts the brain into gamma. Gamma frequency is the in the zone. It's the creative state of mind. And so we tested it. And even if you put this on your belly, the brain goes into gamma. Obviously, it's stronger gamma if you put it on the brain. So then we did a research project on 10 long-standing opioid addicts who, since they became addicted, have never been free. All 10 of them got totally free of their addiction cravings. They're now well over 2 years. And at least 9 of them have returned to work. And, their problems are wiped off the books because they've fulfilled all their obligations, etc. I don't know anything that comes close to that. But this device also sets the frequency on your cells. Every cell in your body has a minus 70 millivolt charge on it if it's at peace. If it gets at minus 60, it's hyper. If it gets at minus 90, it doesn't work at all. And what this particular device does is reset a minus 70 millivolt charge. So I have, for instance, you put it on the chest, I had a woman whose oxygen saturation in her finger was 75%. Within 30 minutes, it was 96%. I've had people with blood pressure of 200 over 110. Again, within 30 minutes, bringing it down to normal. So it resets the normal physiology of the body as well as the brain. So it's obviously my favorite gadget at the moment. But I still work with others. Have you ever heard of scalar energy?
I have, yes. What are you doing with scalar energy?
Well, scalar energy really, to me, is the physical manifestation of God. According to physicists, all empty space in the universe is filled with scalar energy. In an empty space the size of a helium molecule, there's enough energy to boil the ocean if you focus it.
Wow.
So several years ago, my engineer friend created a scalar device for me. And so we began measuring a chemical that is rarely looked at, unfortunately, in conventional medicine called adrenomedullin. Adrenomedullin is the biochemical reaction to stress. In a healthy person, it is 2 to 10. I brought in 28 adults, and the average was over 150, the adrenomedullin level. We had them sit just 9 hours a week, because they had to come into the office, 9 hours a week for 4 weeks, so roughly an hour a week. The adrenomedullin came down over 50%.
Wow.
So then we had them come back, and we took 2 drops of blood, and we looked at the blood under a dark field microscope. Now, when you look at the blood under a dark field microscope, you see all kinds of things you can't see any other way. There are 18 different inflammatory markers you can see under the microscope. The drop of blood, the second drop of blood was just put in front of the scaler device for an hour, and the inflammatory markers went down 80%. That time, we also, when they went into the room, we had them. We measured the malondialdehyde. That's the breakdown of your fat cells, that have the walls of your molecule or your cells that have been killed by free radicals. That went down in 3 hours, 40%.
Wow.
So we now know that just having this within 25 feet of you in the room reduces inflammation markedly. So that's another great benefit of electrotherapy. This is just another one of my electrical gadgets. But of course, everything ultimately boils down to you and your individual beliefs and attitudes. And so the great scheme this week is to emphasize the fact that, for instance, that Blacks have this much higher death rate from the COVID-19 virus. But it's not because they're Black. It's because they have a higher incidence of obesity, hypertension, and diabetes. And so that's true, whatever the color of your skin is. Mm-hmm. We now know unequivocally that if you do not have certain basic habits, you're a sitting duck for everything that goes wrong. There are 5 habits that are critical for health. At the top of the list is a body weight that is normal. That is a body mass index of 18 to 24. By the time you get to a body mass index of 30, that's only 40 pounds overweight for most people, your risk is the same as someone who smokes 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Of dying of heart disease or stroke. Yeah. 40 pounds or more overweight. Now, smoking, even though smoking's down, 22% of adults still smoke. By the time you smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day, you're going to die an average of 18 years early. In fact, the average American dies 22 years prematurely. That's average American. Average age is 78. And that's because we don't have the 5 health habits. The third one is eating a minimum of 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. The average American gets 2.2. And I point out that ketchup and French fries are not vegetables.
Sweet potato fries.
Exactly. The sweet potatoes are much better than regular potatoes. My day starts with the equivalent of 20 servings of fruits and vegetables in a slush.
In a smoothie?
Yeah. That's how I start my day. It's just the way I prefer to live. Now, the next habit that is missing is physical activity. Sitting all day is as risky as smoking a couple of packs of cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Only 10% of Americans get the minimum exercise health. That is 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Only 10% get that much. I get 2 hours every morning. I start my day sweating. And I mean, only about 40 or 45 minutes of that I'm doing that kind of exercise. But I do 2 hours of something. Just, I like it. It keeps me healthy. Oh, well. And then sleep. People who sleep 6 hours or less on average function at the level of someone who's slightly drunk. There are more automobile accidents from people who didn't get enough sleep than there are from alcohol.
Wow.
So you need to sleep 7 or 8 hours every night. I mean, unless it is a medical emergency, I'm not going to miss my sleep for anybody.
Yeah.
Those are the critical ones. Now, in addition to that, this is not so easily measurable, but there is what I would call your basic faith and belief system. And I have never in this life that I know of had a doubt about, well, the spiritual life. Another of my things at age 4, I crawled up on a lard can in my grandmother's kitchen to watch my uncle making a snowman outside. Boy, be careful, you get hurt. I said, Grandma, don't worry. If you're going to die, you're going to die. To which she responded, well, that's true, son, but you could certainly shorten your life. But I have always known, I mean, I grew up with a family of all kinds of great aunts and uncles and, relatives. And so old age never bothered me either. But I did get interested about 2005 in telomeres. Telomeres, of course, are the tips of your DNA. Mm-hmm. And they're sometimes described as like the eraser on your pencil. They wear out, so to speak. On average, if you have good health habits, your telomeres shrink 1% every year of your life. So we're genetically predestined to live 100 years. Well, so in 2006, I began working on ways to regenerate your telomeres. I've already proven 3 different techniques that will regenerate your telomeres 3.5% a year. So over 10 years, you get 35 years younger. I'm now just halfway through a current research project. Our preliminary of only 10 patients, the telomeres grew 8% in 6 months.
Wow.
So I consider that the most, yeah. So by September, we will be done with, well, let's see, actually August we'll be done. At any rate, if it holds up in 60 people, which is what we're doing now, and double blind and all that kind of stuff, if it holds up at 8% growth, I mean, that is absolutely astounding. And it's simple. All my techniques are simple. I mean, one of them does require an hour a day, but you can do it while sleeping. You don't have to do anything. You just have to
Which one is that?
The Rejuva Matrix.
Okay. Is that the glasses?
No, that's the Relax Mate.
Okay.
Rejuva Matrix is a mattress.
Okay.
In the center of the mattress is pure old copper screen, on which is 1 pound of crushed sapphire crystal. Sapphire enhances electromagnetic energy even better than quartz. And that is hooked to a Tesla coil. And that mattress then, when you turn on the Tesla coil, puts out 52 to 78 billion cycles a second at a billionth of a watt per centimeter square. That is our natural absorption of gigafrequencies, these gigabillion cycles per second. 1 hour of exposure to that a day, you turn it on a timer when you go to bed, regrows your telomeres 3.5%. It's
Wow.
pretty simple. We can also stimulate specific acupuncture points with essential oils, and that'll do the same thing.
Mhm.
Now, the current project is actually using patches about that big that go on specific acupuncture points. One patch a day, change the points.
Wow.
And so I just entered my 60th patient yesterday in that study. And well, we're going to know by fall if it works, because that'll be available, of course, on the market after we finish the study as well. And that's not my invention. I'm doing that for another company that I know that's very, very safe. I mean, just a little patch over an acupuncture point stimulates it as well as the needle does.
Wow.
So that's just part of the broad field that I call holistic medicine.
It is quite a broad field, and for you to narrow it down to 5 keys, I know I need to step up my fruit and vegetables. Yeah, I so appreciate your simplicity and really creating lifestyles that are, I don't want to say simple, but that feel like I can do this, right?
Well, I mean, all you got to do is make that decision for most people. But,
Hmm.
I mean, remember, here's just one out of the box thought. For the last 70 years, physicians have been pushing cholesterol as an evil entity, so to speak. We'd be dead without cholesterol. Our brain has more cholesterol than anything in the world. It is the foundation. A wonderful book came out several months ago that suggests it may not be the cholesterol at all. It may be that we eat too much calcium. Americans consume an average of 1,000 milligrams a day of calcium. Every other country in the world, which has a lower death rate from heart disease, they eat 200, 250 milligrams, a fourth to a fifth as much calcium as we do. But maybe the calcium that is causing the cholesterol to be deposited in the arteries. And statin drugs, well, they're one of my top enemies. I think they are the craziest thing ever invented, because they will eventually kill your brain. They start by killing your muscles and every organ in your body, and eventually brain rot from statin drugs. I mean, one of my favorite statements: you try to put one in my mouth, I'll bite your hand off.
So, can you tell me about the new book that you're actually writing right now? I know you've got
Yes.
so many books, but I know that you also continue to
Well,
write.
yes. Last summer, I suddenly had this idea: who killed common sense? I mean, my father used to say, common sense is the most uncommon commodity. That was 80 years ago, my father was saying. And in June of
There's
last year,
truth.
yeah. So in June of last year, something happened. I thought, who killed common sense? So that's how I started to write the book. And of course, I asked my partner, Dr. Soren, and also I invited the only chair of conscientious psychology in the world to join us. I created the Mary Charlotte Bailey Shealy Chair of Conscientious Psychology at Missouri State University about 4 years ago. And Amber is a wonderful psychologist. So Amber is contributing her work on conscientiousness, because conscientiousness is organized and responsible. And then I have a wonderful poet friend. Every day practically she just embellishes my day with her latest poem, Georgianne Gender. And so her poetry is scattered throughout the book as well, because she really tells the story in such a beautiful way. So we just got it all organized today, and I'm just waiting for permission from the other 3 to send it off to the publisher. So hopefully it might be out by late this fall.
Late fall. And where can people find that?
Well, they'll be able to find it, of course, on my website. And I do want to mention that because there are certain things that I do offer people for free. My 2 favorite things are autogenic training, retraining the brain to be able to detach from things you can't change, or my book, 90 Days to Self-Health, which really outlines the foundations for the whole mental transformation. If you go to my website, normshealy.com, you can order the book, or Autogenic Focus is the way it's put there, but that's an MP3, 18 minutes. And if you do that twice a day for 3 months, it retrains your brain. It is the single greatest, 27,000 scientific references on how good it is.
Wow. So that's really important for people to truly start right now with all of the anxiety and overwhelm that the pandemic is bringing up for people. Yeah, I know
exactly.
I know it's bringing up a lot of trauma for people.
Well, it is a lot of trauma. I mean,
right.
I mean, I remember World War II extremely well. I was 9 years and 3 days old when Pearl Harbor was bombed. And so, I lived through it. It was nothing like this. It was an energized time where we got together and, won the war. And so I think that's what we should do now. Let's get together spiritually together and move to detach from those things we can't change and move on.
Yeah, beautifully said. I agree. Thank you. Any other thoughts that you have to share?
Yes, one of my favorites. Back in the 70s, you probably don't remember Mad Magazine, but there was a little character, a guy who was always on the cover of Mad Magazine.
I do remember it.
Oh, great. There was a poster that had his picture on it, and it said, "I'm okay because God does not create junk." And so I often say to my patients, remember, look in the mirror and say, "I'm okay because God does not create junk."
I love that. And so true. So true. Thank you so much. I think that if more people can understand this, they can open up to a vocation, in a sense, that can help the world as well.
Exactly. Well, my number one statement over and over again is there's only one purpose in life: to help other people. And whatever you do that helps other people, the person who made this ballpoint pen to me is just as important as I am. Because I'd be bored out of my gourd trying to do that. and then I couldn't do what I do.
Yeah, you can write all your books without that pen.
Yes. Well, fortunately, I can now type on a computer too. So. Many of my books were handwritten way back.
I believe it. I can kind of, I don't know. I can see it. Wow. Well, I have just so enjoyed our time together, and I want it to last forever. I thank you so much for not only being here today, but for all that you're doing in the world for everybody.
Thank you. With blessings on your own work.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us on Beauty and the Mess. Feel free to visit Robin on Instagram at Robin_Emmerich. Keep on living your beautiful life and embrace the mess.